started in real estate in 1975. I was all of 20 years old and scared to death. I remember on my first listing appointment, sitting there, I was sitting at the floor, and at that time, before the internet, floor time was a whole big deal. But I'm sitting on the floor at the office, and someone called, and they wanted to know about listing their house. Well, I hadn't gone through all the classes yet at the office I was at. And I remember saying, where do you live? How do I get there? I think of all the mistakes I made today. But somehow I found the house. And because I was a brand new broker, you know, and the little bit that I had learned in the first 3 evening sessions I had had with the brokerage class, you know, I knew that you were supposed to ask for a certain percentage of a commission, and I asked for 7%, and the people actually gave it to me. Of course, at that time, homes were $35,000. But I remember after that thinking, okay, well now I'm going to sit open house and sell it. So I got the listing, and I was very excited, and I sat that first open house, and I sat, and I sat, and I sat. And nobody came, and I was so depressed. Well, at 5 o'clock, I'm taking down the signs, and this one couple, as I'm taking out the sign from the street, said, you know, is that house open? And I said, well, I'm just closing up. And they said, well, we'd like to see it. Well, they came in, and they said, you know, we'd like to buy this house. Again, I was brand new to the business. I had no idea this doesn't ever happen. Anyway, I said, okay, follow me to my office. Now, I had not gone through the class on how to do a contract yet. The next thing I did was call my sellers and tell them to come down there. So what I was doing was literally, because I remember this is Sunday night, so there's nobody there. I literally was running from room to room with the seller in one and the buyers in another. And then at one point, I actually said to the seller, you know, it might be easier if I just put you all in the same room. And I remember the seller looking at me and saying, why do I need you then? And he was right. So I could get this thing to turn off so it doesn't make noise. Yeah, okay, sorry. Anyway, that was a lesson I learned. Somehow I got through that first transaction, and I closed escrow. And then I started going through the rest of the classes, of course. And I realized all the mistakes that I had done in that first transaction. And I was so embarrassed. And I remember, I never put those buyers on any, you know, tickle list to call later, send cards to later, nothing. 5 years later, I ran into the buyer. And I ran into her at a real estate event. She had gotten into real estate. And this is the one thing I'd like to impart to you. She said, you know, Rosemary, you did such a good job in representing us in the purchase of our home. I wanted to be just like you. So what I really want to impart to you is the fact that although I made a million little mistakes, because my goals were right, which was to get a couple that wanted a house into their home, and I tried to put their needs first, as you should always do with all clients, if your heart is in the right place, you will be a success. And that's one thing I'd like to impart to you. Now certainly, and as Rob will tell you, it's very important to do all the other things right. But again, being new in real estate, or even being experienced in real estate, we all make mistakes, some bigger than others. One nice thing about real estate is, truthfully, you can usually fix it. And it's just going about finding out how to mitigate it. The most important thing I can tell you is to explain to your sellers the need for disclosure. I honestly, at the time of a listing appointment, and I think that this is one of my secrets of success, is that as hard as it may seem, I am always honest with everyone. I know that there's a million other brokers out there that will go tell someone that their home that's worth $400,000 is worth $500,000. And if another agent lists that home for $500,000 and it does not sell because it truthfully wasn't worth it, in the end, their reputation will be tarnished. I can't worry about those agents. I really can't. I only worry about my name and my reputation. And that's something I'm very proud of. Your integrity. No matter what you do, whether it's going to get your car fixed, you know, you always pay your bills, and it's very important to always stay ahead of keeping that integrity. You never want to do anything that, you're almost a politician in a sense, because your integrity and your reputation is absolutely everything. I feel that the reputation that you earn by doing a good job. And you earn it by doing what's right for your clients at all times. And sometimes that's hard to do. I've actually talked people out of listing their homes, and I've talked people out of buying homes. No one sale is worth my career. And I always try to do what's best for the client. The other thing that I would impart to you is that there is nothing more important than listings. I know that there's other sales trainers out there that will tell you, you know, go after the business, prospect 90% of the time. You know, I don't quite agree with that. I honestly do believe in listings. For me, what really started my, what I call farming career, was having children. I mean, you do want to stay close to home, and what's really nice is that you can integrate a lot of the things that you do to promote business with activities with your children. You know, when my children were young, I was the brownie leader. You know, it was all those things that wound up meaning something later. You have to get active in your community. You have to do the things that people will know you and have a good feeling about you. Getting down to the brass tacks of listings. He who has the listings controls the market. I believe personally in farming. I farm a geographical area, which is where I live. And there's approximately 1,000 homes. I send out postcards. I think that's very important. What I try to do is I integrate my clients into, right now, because obviously it's been years now. My youngest child just graduated college. You know, he's 24. So I don't have kids in school right now, so I can't quite use that. But what I've honestly done is I've integrated my clients into my marketing program. I think that it's important that when you have a sale, that you advertise it. One thing that I do with every sale, and it's almost become a tradition now, is that I take sold signs pictures of my clients. And that's a lot of fun, and actually they all love it. And I let them say a quote. I mean, if they're moving out of the area, in my postcard they can say, you know, we love living in Santa Rosa Valley, we hope that, you know, in the future we'll come back, or we're moving to this because of the transfer, whatever. But they always will say, especially when I tell them that they can say whatever they want, what's really nice is they're very great about saying how pleased they were with my services. We do live in an internet environment. Now you have social media. Through Realtor.com, there's social bios, Zillow, Trulia, they all give you places to get recommendations. Once you get those recommendations from your clients, and they've put their name to them, promote that recommendation. You have Facebook, you have, so who here is not on social media? Not. Because social media is very important. It is one way that, number one, you connect with clients. Secondly, you do not want to connect as friends with other brokers. I mean, you keep your real estate business, whether you have a separate page and a family and friends page, but you do not connect the two. But because your clients want, whenever you have business dealings with someone, you certainly don't advertise their situations unless they promote it in some sense. In gathering listings, you know, honestly, one of my best tools is the fact that I have been selling real estate and I have been very successful. But to be successful, there is no magic script. I love that, how, you know, so many people try to hawk scripts. There isn't a magic script. But you do have to invest. I invest in the marketing of my listings. I invest in being able to provide my sellers services and extra things that no one else will. One of the best things that I offer, and when I'm going through a listing presentation, and I think that this is a very important point to make, one of the best, California, it's a great state to live in. It's got beautiful weather. It's also the most litigious state in the United States. I believe there's percentages, approximately 85% of the real estate lawsuits are brought by buyers. And they're brought against sellers, and unfortunately they throw us into it too. What I provide my sellers with each and every listing is an E&O policy. That E&O policy I get through CRES Insurance, and I think it's one of the most wonderful things that I've ever seen in my life. Because I can offer my sellers, and depending on which home protection plan you use, you know, it has the potential of being doubled or tripled. But you can offer your sellers that peace of mind. Because what's most important to your sellers, other than selling their home, is when they walk away with their equity, that they can keep it. And I make that point to them. Because my goal is to not only sell your home, market it to its best advantage, but it is also to protect your equity when you walk away. And this is one way that I do this, because I pay for this policy. Now, when I was with my wonderful broker with Century 21, his insurance carrier was CRES Insurance. And so he's the one who actually was smart enough to get this program, and I just loved it. Going to work for a company that's an NRT company, and I don't know if anybody here, you know, has that, but NRT doesn't have, you know, they're self-insured, and it's so funny when you really read the bottom line what is there, it isn't much insurance. So actually what I did is I now have a separate policy that I pay for, which is called the Agent Protection Plan. And I love that policy because it gives me the ability to have that E&O insurance, which I use as a listing tool. I mean, it costs me, I think it's $680 a year. And I mean, it's paid for itself over and over and over again from the listing appointments. Because as nice as this benefit is, agents are not aware it's there. Because the brokers that do have that insurance policy don't, you know, give those agents the training to understand how to use it. One thing that I do is in each and every, and I brought actually a copy of one of my listing presentations. I think it's important with each and every listing presentation to actually show up with something that you're going to leave with the client. And I kind of brought you a kind of a basic example. You know, there's certainly much nicer ones that you can get out there, but you know, I list homes that, you know, range in price between $500,000 to $3 million. And honestly, I'm surprised that other brokers don't do this little bit to honestly market themselves as well as give knowledge and an explanation to the sellers. You know, and I am going to talk about a few other companies here. I don't know, are you aware of something called Cloud CMA? Mm-hmm. You are, okay. There is a company called Cloud CMA. All of us do the market analysis on the multiple listings. The only thing about that is that the pictures aren't that clear. There is something, and I didn't bring it with that in it, darn it, I guess they took it out. The Cloud CMA has these gorgeous photos of each and every listing that your listing will be competing against. When I'm in a discussion with the sellers, what I usually will start telling them is that, and I think this is an important point to make, what they list their home for is their decision. It isn't mine. But I try to make sure it's an educated decision. And what I'm telling you, without telling them, every time we go on a listing appointment and we take it, especially for someone like me who spends a lot of money on marketing, I'm gambling. I am gambling that I am going to be able to sell my investment, because that's what it is. Whether it is just time or the advertising, you know, I don't know, you know, in San Diego how much they do brokers' lunches, and honestly we don't up where I am, but you know, I spend a lot of money on advertising. So for me, to take a listing, I have to feel some comfort that it is well priced. Both for my integrity and reputation, I don't like the thought of having a listing that doesn't sell. But on top of that, when I go through having marketed homes, and I had one house that I had listed at $6 million. And I decided, you know, really and truly, I got to do a great job of marketing this home. I spent $30,000 on marketing a house that did not sell. I keep thinking about the car I could have bought one of my kids. Now, although I did not sell that house, I did get other buyers out of it that have more than paid for that. The most important, and you have to find out what's best for you, what you get your responses from. With Realtor.com, if you do like how many of you do geographical farming? Only, not very many of you. Okay. The rest of you are like social farming? I mean, how are you getting your business?
Referral.
But referral from what? I mean, is it from past clients? How many years?
Everything.
Everything. Well, how do you promote that referral business? Are you sending out postcards? What? See, because unless you have a geographical farm, the nice thing about a geographical farm is you can come up with one advertising piece that works for the geographical area. So that, you know, it helps you. When you have a social farm or a church farm, and there's so many different kinds of farms, you know, from where you graduated from, you know, a women's group. I mean, there's a million different places that you can farm. But you have to think of what marketing piece you're going to utilize. One of the things that, I advertise my listings. I can give you as an example. In the last month, I listed a home for $1.375, represented my own buyer at $1.375. I have 3 houses this month I double popped.
Wow.
That's extremely high in this business. It's the marketing. But you see, it is a geographical market. Because Homes and Land magazine, you know, at the top of my page, the finest home Santa Rosa Valley has to offer. Santa Rosa Valley is 1,000 homes. I farm that area. When you don't have a geographical farm, it's awfully hard to say, you know, here's the homes that I've sold to people at this church. You know what I'm saying? It's just, for me, it's easier. So that is my focus. The other thing, honestly, is me remembering, you know, he who controls the market has the list. You know, he has the listings, controls the market. When someone wants to look now in my area, and it took a long time. I mean, I started farming that area in 1987. I became the top agent 4 years later in the area. It was 4 years of investment. Nothing in real estate happens without an investment. So, you know, there's no easy cures. I always started with one geographical area, and truthfully, I don't have any desire to go bigger. One thing that I do is I've integrated myself into the neighborhood. I'm actually the councilwoman now for the area. I really have integrated. You know, I'm the largest supporter of the elementary school. You know, and they put this big banner up with my name every year. I just got, it's the neatest thing. I was at their, and I go to every one of their like dinner dances. My kids have been out of that school for 13 years. But I want everyone, when they think of my geographical area, to think of me. As far as clients, although we do not have the requirement, like a doctor or a lawyer, your client's business that they tell you should be kept private. Don't ever be in a position where you discuss a client with anyone else, ever. It is so important that they can trust you. Because in selling their home, we're selling the houses, but it's the people that we deal with. It's listening to them, taking their best interests at heart. True customer service can only come from your heart. And that's something I want you all to remember. have to think of them. Fortunately, real estate is not an 8-to-5 job. If you're looking for an 8-to-5 job, this isn't it, and get out now. Because I don't know of anyone that honestly, unless they're maybe, you know, the agents that work for banks, or that do foreclosures, you know, because I think that's more banking hours. But anybody who really wants to be successful in this business, you have to understand that, just like a doctor, when the clients are off of work and they need you, you need to be there. I make it a point to always answer my phone, and to, unless I'm with another client, I will answer that phone, and if I can't talk to someone, I will tell them, you know what, I'm in a meeting, I promise you I'll call you right back, and I do. Your actions have to reflect what you say. I go through that, and that's honestly what takes the majority of the time in my listing appointment, is that disclosure statement. Because I honestly help those sellers in understanding each of those questions. I mean, how many people that, you know, there's, in the seller property questionnaire, there's one question which I call the come sue me question. And it's on that first page. I don't know if anybody has one around, but it basically says, you know, what remodeling, modifications, repairs have you ever done in your life? So that's what I call the come sue me question. I explain to my sellers that what I want them to do is write "see addendum," and then I send them something. And what I send them is, you know, it's a word thing, a Word document, and it just explains, you know, the question, and you know, I have them fill in the answers. But at the end, I always make sure my seller said, you know, over the years we've done so many things to this home, and we've tried to remember everything, but there certainly are things that we could have forgotten. And that way, at least you've given them what I call the out clause. You know, because truthfully, nobody remembers everything. The other thing is when you talk about permits, I mean, how many people realize that when you change a water heater, you need to get a permit? Not many people realize that in my area. None. You know? So, you know, again, when you're going through that, and what I always tell my sellers, when the buyer gets this document, if the agent has done their job, it's right after they've bought the house. And that's why you need to do it at the listing appointment. When the buyer gets that and they get it right away, they're still excited about the house. They're not nitpicking it apart. So I think it's number one important to get it before the home inspection, because if you give it to them after the home inspection and there's something in there they wish they'd had the inspector check, you're talking about an extension of contingencies. Number two, I always try to tell my sellers what costs you $50 today to fix. If you wait till after the close of escrow and the buyer finds it, they're going to say it costs $500. So be smart. Let's go through this list and let's be honest. The other thing I usually recommend, I don't know how you guys feel about it. I don't usually recommend home inspections before. But one thing I do recommend is termite inspections before, because that is what I call a deep pocket item for the seller. I mean, everything else can be pretty much negotiated out. But, I mean, in my area, the seller usually pays for Section 1. So I want my sellers to know up front how much money that's going to be. The other conversation you need to have with your sellers is how long they've had the loan. You don't want surprises like prepays or something that you just don't know about. You really need to get into some tough questions with your sellers so that you can advise them and help them the most. And don't be afraid to ask those questions, because you have to get those answers in order to represent them. I've been selling real estate, I believe, 23 years. In 1996, I was sued for the first time. And I gotta tell you, I was scared to death. Single mom, 3 kids. And although I was doing well in real estate, it was definitely scary. I remember when I got served, since I'd never been served before, and as a big woman, I started crying. I mean, I started bawling. I was so upset. And I remember my broker, who I love, I just adore this man. He said, you know what, don't worry, I get served all the time. It's no big deal. And he said, we had a really good E&O carrier, but I just went with this new company, and I'm sure they're going to be good too. Gave me no confidence whatsoever. Anyway, that was in 1996. The E&O carrier that was relatively new was CRES Insurance. They came out, they evaluated the case, and very truthfully, I've done a great job on my disclosures. What I do with my sellers, do all of you do your sellers' disclosures at the time of the listing appointment? Good. I don't want to hear anybody say they wait till there's an offer. Basically what it was buyers who had bought a house, and they wanted to sue the sellers and me for the cost of the remodel. Now that was a very interesting lawsuit, and actually one of the owners of CRES Insurance got very involved in it. You know, I can tell you, in real estate and honestly in legal cases, you know, we're in what I would call challenging times. You know, whether the market's up, the market's down. When a buyer buys, and you know, for those of you who've been in the business since 2007, when we were at our height, you know, when somebody pays $1 million for their house, and it's now worth $600, they're looking for their lost equity. So they're going to look for the reasons why they can sue. One of the, you know, the biggest cases, and I don't know if you're going to bring this one up, the Shapiro case. Or were you going to bring that one up?
I'll let you do it. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, there's this one case scared me to death. There was a story about a family that lived in Sherman Oaks, California, and great people. He actually was a lay minister in his church, and while he was a lay minister in his church, he brought in kids, you know, but he had this little problem with the kid next door. He called the police on them a few times because the kid was a little bit loud. I don't know exactly what he did, but he was apparently a real troublemaker. So he called the police on him a few times. And I believe it was like 2 years later, he was transferred. And he was transferred through his business. Prudential Relo was involved. So he did his seller's disclosures. And one of the disclosure items is whether or not you have neighborhood noise or nuisances. Because he was a lay minister, he brought this kid into his church group. He felt he wasn't a nuisance, so he felt he answered that question correctly by saying no. Well, I think he sold the house in 1993. And I don't know if you all remember, in 1994 there was a big earthquake that affected the San Fernando Valley. The house that he'd sold for, I believe it was about and I don't remember the exact numbers, I'm just guessing right now, about $600,000, was now worth about $300,000. One day, the kid next door causes a problem. They call the police. The police come to their door and say, oh my gosh, we used to come here before a lot when the last people owned the house. Guess what? This is the reason to sue. They took that case to court. Those people that had been transferred actually had to buy the house back for what was paid for it, and what it was worth that before the earthquake. After that, they sold it for like $300,000, after going through court forever, because again, remember, there's a real company involved, and we have all this stuff going through it. I mean, I can't even imagine what the legal fees were. But all because they had not mentioned that they'd had a previous problem with a neighbor. Had nothing to do with the value of the house, had nothing to do with the condition of the house. So it's so important when you're going through those seller's disclosures that you ask the sellers, have you ever called the police? Or Easton decision, the one that had to do with the slope. Have you ever had someone here that's told you there's something wrong that you have not taken care of? Or even better, have you ever had an earthquake claim that's been paid for that you haven't done the work for? You have to ask the questions. Because there are questions that aren't limited to 5 years. They're long. They honestly have a big, long life in them. So you really need to answer them as completely and honestly as possible.